What's up, guys? Anime Yokage coming at you with My Hero Academia Chapter 414. I know it's been a minute since we've been able to cover this, but it's finally back. And this isn't a long chapter, but it's a great chapter. So let's get right into it. If you don't remember where we left off, Deku was not doing amazing in this fight. He was still holding his own, but not doing amazing, not making any ground, not really putting any lasting damage on Shigaraki. And that's when a plan was formulated. Now, the plan was formulated after Star and Stripes' vestige within Shigaraki was able to point out a giant fracture or some kind of fissure within Shigaraki's psyche. And this vision that Star and Stripe gave was transferred to All Might and all the vestiges. After seeing this chink in Shigaraki's armor and also realizing that One for All can have quirk by quirk stolen, it doesn't have to be all be stolen at once. They figure, why let him steal it when we can just give it to him by force? Kudo, the second user, explained that if we give Shigaraki one by force each one of our quirks, that we'll be able to attack him from the inside and reach the psyche of Tenko that is being compressed and stowed away within Shigaraki's hate and malice. And Deku, without a moment of hesitation, he hops right into action, already hearing the plan, already understanding what he needs to do. It's so cool seeing Deku utilize Black Whip like this. It looks like a symbiote from Spider-Man and Venom, wrapping around him and puppeteering his body because his body is completely spent. He has exhausted every bit of stamina and strength that he has, but Black Whip can do the work for him. Even the 5th and 6th user, En and Banjo, are completely flabbergasted at how Deku is using the quirk, how efficiently he's using it, and how well adjusted he is to it already. Kudo points out that he's able to use all the quirks like this because he doesn't just follow orders. He is truly marveling at his quirks and always has every quirk within One for All. He admires each and every one of them greatly for what they bring to the table and what they allow him to do. Kudo, the second user, underlines this is what makes Deku shine brighter, and this is what makes him the best user of One for All to date. And that's a lot coming from One for All because it was the user of All Might, Nanashimura, all the past users. They've all been great in their own way, but they've never been able to utilize it like Deku can. And the panel looks awesome. It just looks like this giant symbiote wrapping itself around Deku, and he's got all these tendrils, he's got these claw things, and I'm loving the face mask that he's creating with Black Whip. It looks so cool, so vigilante, and this is the look that I always wanted from Deku that I never knew even existed or even I could get. Deku brings up the fact that he's going to have to try and match Shigaraki's speed without gear shift. He can't use gear shift again or his body will shut down. So now he needs to make some calculated efforts in order to transfer the second user over into Shigaraki. If you guys remember from the very beginning of the story, how One for All is transferred, it has to be transferred by DNA. We get a little flashback to All Might explaining this to Deku. But also in the next panel over, another flashback, it says that it doesn't matter how it happens, as long as the holder of One for All is willingly giving it up, it doesn't even have to be completely consensual. That sounds weird. But it can be given to an unwilling recipient. Kudo said this is something that him and Bruce, the third user, actually experimented with in the past. And as Kudo is preparing himself to be transferred into Shigaraki, Deku actually figures out that he needs to get some of his blood somehow, one way or another, into Shigaraki's wound before it heals. Because as you guys know, Shigaraki has a crazy regeneration and healing rate. So any wound that's open is not going to be open for long. Deku is saying that he's going to have to transfer his blood over into Shigaraki at the moment that he strikes. So he's going to have his own blood on him somewhere, wherever he strikes from. And whenever it hits Shigaraki, it's going to hit with enough force that his blood is transferred into Shigaraki. He also adds that he is completely exhausted and at his limit from overusage of his quirk, especially gear shift. So whenever he does this, he's only going to get one chance most likely. Shigaraki's not dumb though. He actually starts to figure out that there's something else going on. These attacks aren't just attacks. And one of the attacks that Deku launches, He actually feels so weird about it that Shigaraki cuts off his own hand in order to avoid anything or something. He's kind of just working off gut instinct at this point. Shigaraki knows that he's planning something because anyone at this level of exhaustion and the fact that Deku can barely breathe would be worrying about their own life if they didn't have a different goal in mind. I think in this moment, Shigaraki finally realizes that Deku is not worried about survival. The only thing that he's worried about is defeating Shigaraki. And Shigaraki starts getting uncomfortable. We see him start scratching his neck again, tick that he had before whenever he would get anxious or uncomfortable. He claims that he knows that Deku isn't in his right mind, and he can't figure out the plan. So to fight against Deku, he'll just keep destroying everything. He'll destroy Deku, he'll destroy this country, he'll decay everything. There's this super awesome panel of them both jumping at each other in the forest and just about to collide. There's no words said between them, but it shows in their mind they're both speaking. Both say, I will. Shigaraki says, kill you. And Deku says, transfer it. And in a crazy turn of events of the next move, Deku actually uses smokescreen. And it's not just us that are confused or surprised by this. N is as well, the original holder of smokescreen. He's freaking out within the Vestige world saying, why?
Why? Why? Why? Why?
My quirk is the most useless among all the quirks right now. But as Kudo said before, Deku truly admires every quirk that he has been given and granted, and he sees more worth in N's quirk than even N does. To counter this, because Shigaraki can't exactly see where Deku is or what he's going to do due to Deku's speed, he just says, I'll just decay everything and start it now. That way, if you touch the ground, you'll be destroyed, and you'll have to come after me and attack me head on because you don't want me to destroy everything. But Deku already thought of that. He launches Black Whip into the ground like Black Chain, and he rips up the entire chunk of ground where Shigaraki is to ensure that his decay cannot spread to everything else around. It's actually shown that Deku was planning on doing this way back whenever Shigaraki first launched him back before they even formulated the plan. When he was laying on the ground in the crater, Deku was already planning Black Chain into the ground, rooting it, so that when the moment came, he could use it in order to separate the ground that Shigaraki is on from the rest of the earth. Shigaraki actually has a flashback saying this is exactly like UA's anti-dequirk mechanism, to where if you remember, when UA was up in the air, separated from everything, every time that Shigaraki would try and use decay, the tile that was on the ground would pop up and separate from the rest, not allowing him to touch the ground and keep spreading the decay. But no time to think. Danger Sense actually alerts Shigaraki that something is coming. And after he gets that alert, he actually uses Search to find out where Deku is. And before we know it, Shigaraki reaches up and grabs Gran Torino's cape. But Deku's not in the cape anymore. Deku used Black Whip in combination with Gran Torino's cape and a drop of blood to actually trick Search into thinking that he was coming up from behind Shigaraki. And points out this is the same strategy that he used against Nagant. But the blood isn't actually Midoriya's, even though it is Midoriya's blood. I know this is getting really confusing, but it starts to make sense. A little bit. As One for All has been passed down through the generations, it has accumulated the DNA of every user that it's been passed on to. That means that Midoriya's blood isn't just Midoriya's blood. He holds the blood of Nana Shimura, of Banjo, of All Might, of Kudo, all of them. And so, since he was given Search by All for One, and All for One had seen Kudo in the past, it was a gamble, but Search actually worked to see Kudo's DNA in that blood. And Deku used this opportunity to land a sneak attack or a surprise attack on Shigaraki whenever he wasn't able to defend in time. By blocking his field of vision, he was able to create an opening to land one of the nastiest uppercuts I've ever seen in My Hero Academia. But before this uppercut can land, we actually see Shigaraki's body is acting on its own to bring back that defensive finger armor that's covering his whole body and trying to brace him for the impact of this. And it seems to be acting on its own, and it's really cool to see Shigaraki's body and the evolution of it, How it's switching from like a very light, speedy, agile offensive version to a bulky finger armor version that we saw before at UA. It's almost like he's regressing back into his shell. And as he's covering himself in finger armor, Shigaraki is reaching out to touch Deku's face in order to start decaying him as well. But Deku dodges it and lands that uppercut. And the panel, the scene of this is so awesome. It seriously looks like an uppercut version of United States of Smash. But in this final moment before the second user of One for All gets transferred to Shigaraki, he has a couple words for Deku. He says, "Don't worry about me. To you, I've always just been a ghost." And the consciousness of the second user begins to fade away. But as it begins to fade away, we get a scene of that amalgamation, like city kind that Chibaku Tensei that Shigaraki has in his mind concealing Tenko. The second user comes flying in towards it like a meteor. He slams into the Shibaku Tensei, and you can see buildings breaking off and everything. And you can really see the damage on Shigaraki's face. He has no idea what just happened or even how it happened. And it's so weird because as Deku transferred the quirk over and as Shigaraki is falling away from his punch, we actually see that their memories are kind of being blended. He gets a vision of the first time that Shigaraki ever met Toga and Dabi. Then, as he looks back, he actually sees Shoto at the sports festival whenever they first fought each other and created that bond. And on the other side of him, Spinner is there, the memory of Spinner. The first user appears and says, "Your memories, they're blending together." And even as how confusing this is for all parties included, Deku is reminded, "Don't stop. It's working." And the sixth user yells out, "You need to keep transferring us." So I believe this is when we actually start to see Deku get the upper hand in this fight. It's looked absolutely hopeless to this point, but now the tables are beginning to turn. I wonder what quirks at the very end of this fight that Deku will be left with, because we're led to believe that he still becomes the greatest hero, that's ever lived, the greatest hero that saved the world. But does that mean just because he saved everybody in this moment and he loses all his quirks? Or does he go on in the future to at least hold a couple of them and is able to keep moving on as a hero and keep saving people? I don't know. There was so much to unpack in this chapter, but what an amazing chapter. But most of all, I want to hear what you guys thought. What did you like? What didn't you like? And what do you think is going to happen next? So until next time, Anime Okage, signing out.